Bacteria, lab exercise 2. This is a meteorite from Mars that was found in the Allen Hills in the Antarctic. Every year, teams go to Antarctica to collect meteorites. They're very easy to find against the background of snow, and pounds of these are collected every year at the proper time. Now, why is this meteorite important? Well, it has to do with a biological hypothesis called panspermia. Panspermia hypothesizes that life originated in space somewhere and was transferred here to our planet on meteorites. Now, we know, based on our current space program, that bacteria from Earth can go up into space on the outside of a spacecraft, and when it comes back through the atmosphere, the reentry fire and heating is not enough to completely kill it. It can survive that. And so we have found examples of bacteria that come back down on everything from the Apollo mission to the shuttle missions. Those weren't gathered up in space, although they did survive. We've even found samples of living bacteria on the surface of the International Space Station. Now, why do we think that this meteorite, which dated at about 4 billion years ago, had bacteria or fossilized bacteria? Well, it's very simple. There's these little magnetite crystals, and they form in certain types of bacteria, and they look almost like a string of pearls. Now, here is how they would form. These magnetotactic bacteria leave strands of these little magnetosomes, which are made from magnetite crystals. It is certainly not conclusive evidence, but it is evidence to support the hypothesis. We will continue to search and deal with this through NASA's exobiology program and look for life on various meteors, spacecraft, other planets, etc. But this is just one example of a possible introduction of life to the planet. There are two domains in the bacteria. The domain Archea. The archaic bacteria is an interesting group of bacteria. They're very primitive, and they use energy sources other than eukaryotes. Some examples of some of these energy sources are ammonia, hydrogen, metal ions. Most archaic bacteria are considered extremophiles, meaning that they exist in very hostile or extreme habitats. Here is a species of archaic bacteria that we're going to learn about. It's called Haloquadratum walsbyi. It is found in the Sinai Peninsula between Egypt and Israel, and it occupies these hypersaline pools. That hypersaline means very, very salty. So salty, in fact, that these are one of the only organisms you will find in these pools. It's the only place in the world that you will find these, and this is an electron micrograph showing Haloquadratum walsbyi. There are three basic shapes of bacteria in the regular bacteria, not the archaics. There are Cocci, Bacillus, and Spirillum. The Cocci are the round ones, Bacillus are these rectangular tube-like ones, and the spiral ones obviously are Spirillum. Why are bacteria important? Well, obviously disease. They're also the decomposers. They break down dead biological tissue so that it can be recycled. An even more important role for bacteria are nitrogen fixing. There's 70% nitrogen in our atmosphere, but we can't use it in any way, form, or function unless these nitrogen-eating bacteria or nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil take nitrogen from the atmosphere and fix it into a chemical form in plants so that we can eat it. Animals are dependent upon plants and need that nitrogen. Nitrogen is one of the most important elements in our bodies. And so if we lose the bacteria in the soil, we won't be able to fix nitrogen into plants. And if we can't fix nitrogen into plants, then we don't exist as a species any longer. In this bacterial domain, we're going to look at a few things. Nostoc, which is a cyanobacteria. It's going to be our first one here. And this is also called blue-green algae. It's just a chain of cocci hooked together. The cyanobacteria, Nostoc, is part of the phytoplankton. It's an important part of the food chain, produces a lot of oxygen through photosynthesis, and they are indicative. If you see a huge population explosion of this slimy blue-green Nostoc in a waterway, that's indicative of seriously polluted water. They are incredibly tolerant to polluted waterways. They can survive in environments that other living organisms, even regular green algae, wouldn't do very well in. So if you see a very, very polluted stream that has nothing but blue-green algae in it, it's a pretty good bet that it is highly polluted. This bacteria, Yersinia pestis, this is an infection in the lymphatic system. You get it by flea bites. It's transmitted by these flea bites that suck your blood, and then it transfers in there. This is the bacteria that is responsible for the Black Death. During the Dark Ages, this bacteria killed 1/3 of the human population on the planet, spread around the world. The plague. This one, Streptococcus pyogenes. This causes basically strep throat. And it can be spread through respiratory droplets and hand contact with nasal discharge. If you ever had strep throat, you know you get that sore throat feeling, and you have to go and get a swab in the back of your throat, and then they give you an antibiotic. The last bacterium I want to look at is Clostridium botulinum. This is food poisoning. This is why we have to keep foods refrigerated. The main source of botulism toxin comes from home canned foods if it's done improperly. Canning your own foods is a great idea. Unfortunately, if you screw it up, this bacteria will proliferate and it can be extremely deadly. Another use of the botulism toxin is they take an attenuated version because it can paralyze nerves. And they use it to inject into people's faces, and they call it Botox. And it's attenuated so it can't reproduce, and it can't cause food poisoning, but it temporarily stuns or reduces nerve function in the face, and when the face relaxes, the wrinkles go away. That is all we're going to talk about. These are the only species we're going to talk about in the bacterium group.